Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul. How are you?
I am doing well.
Lots of news.
Well, we don't have to worry about much illness because they found out that coronavirus doesn't exist.
Really?
So we can all take a vacation. But it's still in the news. We haven't proved our point yet, and there's people out there trying to say that it's worse than ever.
Yeah.
I mean, they're thinking about locking down until next Christmas, not next month.
Yeah.
They want to lock down and say maybe next year. Wouldn't it be neat if somebody just decided to have Christmas anyway? What happens if Trump puts up a big Christmas tree and invites 1 million people to the White House lawn?
Good idea.
So,
you'll listen to that.
But anyway, it's last week I said it's not over until it's over, and it's not quite over yet. But in talking with people, because of the way the news is being handled, and because the news is slightly slanted against Trump, some people say, "Well, it looks like there's nothing going on," but there's a few good people working on this program, on finding out if there was fraud or not. In my own mind, without the proof I need in court, my head keeps telling me, how could it not be fraud involved? When you hear these stories, and there is some verification when they showing patterns how people voted, and the evidence that some votes changed in the middle of the night, and there's so much. Here, if you want to call it hearsay, but hearsay is evidence, and we just need to see if they're going to get anybody under oath. But I wonder, let's say there's, Trump doesn't pull it off, but they proved there were 1 million illegal votes, but just not enough, and it's too late to count them. I wonder if there's any penalties for those people. I've never heard of that. That all of a sudden, we caught you manipulating the votes. There has to be somebody out there manipulating votes. But for some reason, it's sort of like Russiagate.
Yeah.
How many people went to prison with Russiagate? There was a few lies told there.
Yeah.
So, but the number one thing is to get the truth out. For various reasons, and I guess the penalties will have to come in various ways. But anyway, it's going on, and there's still a lot of talk, and there's still craziness about the virus, what really is going on with the virus. And there's certainly a growing number of individuals that I would say probably are in our camp, thinking that there's been a lot of lies told, and it's not nearly as dangerous, and there's questions about just how deadly the virus is, and of course there's a lot of excitement about a vaccine, and things like this. So it's in the news, and there's a lot of talk. So we will continue to try to sort it out and let people know what is going on, and hopefully move things in a slightly different direction.
Yeah, the retort always is, the response in mainstream media is always, there's no evidence of widespread cheating. Well, you actually don't need widespread cheating. You need a little bit of cheating here because those margins are razor thin, and that's what they're talking about. We don't know. I saw an extraordinary interview over the weekend. Sidney Powell, who's newly on the president's legal team, she was with Maria Bartiromo, and she was very, very forceful and very, very self-confident. She said, we have evidence that millions of votes were switched from Trump to Biden. And Bartiromo was shocked. She said, can you back this up? She said, I never say anything I can't prove. And she was the youngest U.S. attorney, I think, in history, very successful. She was able to get Mike Flynn to rescind his guilty plea and get back. So I would hate to be here because that seems like a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. But if she's got the goods, man, that's going to be amazing.
Well, she impresses me because usually what we hear on television, both sides, the more they want to make the point, if they talk louder and interrupt more people, that you win the debate, and that's a sort of a bipartisan thing. But when I listened to her, and before I listened to exactly what she was saying, I thought, she seems to be a little timid. Her personality isn't aggressive. She's not yelling very much. But what I was thinking about when she gives her answers, her answers are screaming out. But she says it in such a way that she comes across as an academician telling the truth, which I think is a lot more powerful than trying to get your point across by just shouting over the opposition.
Yeah, absolutely. No, a lot of confidence there. Well, here's what we want to move into. What we started our main topic. We couldn't help but get off track a little. Let's put up this main thing. Now, I just can't believe, Dr. Paul, that most Americans are not going to be rubbed the right way. Let's put up this first thing if we can. Tony Fauci, here's what he said over the weekend. I'm going to see what your reaction, if it was the same as mine. Here's an interview late last week. I was talking with my UK colleagues who are saying the UK is similar to where we are now because each of our countries has that independent spirit. I understand that, but now is the time to do what you're told.
But the question they don't want to ask, and the question they don't want to hear the answer is, who shall be the teller what to do? Who told us what to do? Because that's essentially diametrically opposed to the libertarian principle. We tell ourselves what to do as long as we don't hurt anybody. This means just out of the clear blue, for your health's sake, no matter what, we're going to lock you down even if you're not contagious.
Yeah.
We have to just control it, and you do what we tell you. And of course, that's what authoritarianism is all about. And sometimes it's incremental, and people give up their liberties in small ways, which I think our country is guilty of, until it becomes overwhelming. And the one thing that I argue is that once you concede a little bit of your liberty, the incremental approach is well accepted because, if you took if we go back to, say, the amount of personal liberties and responsibility we had 100 years ago, and then all of a sudden we had everything that we have now, the taxing program and getting on an airplane, all this, people would rebel. That's why every once in a while, when you see lockdown getting out of control, the people finally are saying, hey, enough is enough. But too often people have accepted this lockdown, and they traditionally, I think the greatest evil is couching all this, whether it's support for war or whether it's support for the good of all the people, is the patriotism. It's good for the people. It's good for the country. You have to be patriotic. You have to obey. And if you don't obey and do what Fauci says, you have turned into be a monster. And you know what? They say things aren't changing much, and he's already said that he intends not to be moved from his position anytime soon. So there's no hope for that.
The question I would have is, do as you're told by who? Because even the WHO, the WHO, said lockdowns are a bad way to handle this virus. We've seen plenty of very contradictory information on the efficacy of masks, including maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow, but a very important U.S. Marine Corps study on strict isolation versus no restrictions at all. And the group with the strict isolation actually got COVID more than the ones who went on. So there's plenty of different evidence. It seems basically like science is what I tell you. If it agrees with my view, that's science. If it doesn't, and this is a new kind of fascism. It's called Fauciism, as my friend Jim Chatras quote. But they're talking about a 4 to 6 month lockdown in Germany, and that's the science. Well, they already did a lockdown once, and it didn't work. So they're going to do it. That's typical government, isn't it, Dr. Paul? You do something that doesn't work, well, let's do it again. Let's keep doing it again.
There is a group of people who do this, and I call them the political authoritarians. They get there for power, and they live for power. So they're authoritarians, and they might not even argue with themselves and say, I know everything. I just want to tell other people what to do. So they put them in this category where they think they know, they want to tell other people what to do, and they get there by maneuvering with power and intimidation and taxation and crooked elections, the whole thing. Of course, the enemy for some libertarians would be just pure democracy. The whole idea of there's this compulsion to have pure democracy where 51% can vote anything they want against the other one. And that's what's happening. But you don't have to have 51% controlling the 51%. All you need is a handful of people that are in the right places in our universities or in our then the thing grows on us, because we do know that the worse the system gets, the bigger the lies they get. And everybody lies now that wants to stay in government. So it is a disease. It's an infectious disease that lying is just pragmatism and necessary. As a matter of fact, they even flip it around. you're more patriotic today if you're a good liar.
Yeah,
You can get promoted by being a good liar. But that's, of course, been around for a while.
Yeah. Well, here's a do what you're told thing. Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, he had COVID back in March, I think it was, remember? And he was pretty sick, and he got over it. But last week he came into contact with someone who tested positive. What did he do? He's already gotten over it, so he's immune to it. He put himself into quarantine because he had to follow his own stupid rules that if you come into contact with someone, you got to self-quarantine. So here he is sitting over there in his apartment, self-quarantining. But the thing is, it makes no sense. If getting it and getting over it and having your immune system get over it, if that doesn't provide you any immunity, then the vaccine is completely useless because, as you know, Dr. Paul, all the vaccine does is stimulate that kind of immune response. If there is no immune response to stimulate, then the whole thing's a waste of money.
He did not want to be seen as a hypocrite.
Yeah.
He can look like he doesn't know what he's doing,
Yeah.
but he's probably avoiding the label of hypocrisy. But there's a few out there that are going to have a hard time avoiding the whole term of hypocrisy.
Well, you know, Senator Paul got into some hot water over the weekend because he simply said, hey, if you've gotten COVID and gotten over it, take your mask off. You're immune to it. And of course, he went against the COVID cult. So they said, Rand Paul just wants people to die. Well, if you've had it and you got over it and you don't get immunity, then don't stand in line waiting for a vaccine because it ain't going to help you.
Matter of fact, the vaccine, they're not even sure. They're not positive. All these numbers they come up with, first vaccine is going to be 40% effective. Oh, this week, another week went by. Now we have one that's 95% effective, and it's better than having the disease. So don't ever get infected. Keep going to lockdown, but make sure you go in and check with Bill Gates and make sure he has enough vaccine for you to put in your arm. And
Well, one more on Fauci before we move on, because we had basically a response to Fauci's "Do What You're Told," and that's from one of our favorite doctors, Dr. Atlas. But look at this one more from Fauci. He was on a roll over the weekend. Christmas is probably not going to be possible this year, said doom and gloom Fauci. So he's riding a high horse right now because of Biden's apparent victory or whatever it was. But let's move on, because we could say this is a response to Fauci from Atlas. Let's move to the next one. Here is one of the worst governors in history, Whitmer, in Michigan. Here she is unveiling she looks like a monster, unveiling her new demands of people. Let's look at the next one. Here's her new demands that she's put up. She's shutting restaurants, she's shutting sports, she's shutting schools, she's shutting bingo, no more bowling, don't go to the theaters. Brand new set of demands. But here's what Scott Atlas, the president's coronavirus advisor, tweeted about Whitmer. Now, this has caused a lot of controversy. He said, the only way this stops is if people rise up. You get what you accept. And that was pretty fascinating. And he, of course, Atlas wants people to die. What a monster, worse than Hitler. He clarified, saying, I have never called for violence. I don't want violence. I'm talking about voting and demonstrations. But that is a response to just do what you're told.
well, they're not operating in an irrational fashion when you know what they want. They want more power and this sort of thing. But and what they do is they turn their disgust or a success of a politician into hate. And that's where we are right now. But they're following a very long-known tradition, and that is if the messenger is giving you the bad news, you have to kill the messenger. You know, you can't come to the king and say that this is the truth. Oh no, we'll kill you, and then the problems go away. And that's what they're doing here. They're not dealing. They won't even talk about the problem. They won't even weigh two things on science, and that's not the way science works. Something I was told a long time ago in science, we were always taught that, probably when you have a new discovery, it will invite a lot more questions.
Yeah.
And, how do you use it, and what do you do, and what's the competition? So it's not like you discover something and it's over. It's, new things can come of it. But if you don't like what you're hearing, you don't further investigate and have serious discussion. What you have to do is destroy the people, who are saying it. Just think of, that would explain, the viciousness of how they describe supporters of Trump. And that's been pretty vicious, on the ugly terms that they use. And then they say, they do this and say, what we need, what we really are all about, we're for unity and getting along, you know.
I'm sure you saw some of those pictures of Antifa over the weekend in Washington, D.C., beating up kids and old people who just happened to go to a Trump rally. Okay, you don't like Trump, that's fine. They were beating, it made me sick, really disgusting.
Yeah, that was bad.
But let's talk more about hypocrisy, because that's a great segue, Dr. Paul. Let's have unity. Here's some real hypocrisy. Let's look at this next one. I will remind our viewers of the brilliant Governor Newsom's Thanksgiving guidelines. No more than 3 households, including your own. The host must collect all names and addresses of those attending. They must be held outside. You can go to the bathroom inside if it's frequently sanitized. You're allowed to gather in an open park, but no concurrent gatherings with people you know in the same park. Da-da-da-da-da. All food must be in single-serve disposable dishes. You must wear a mask at all times. You can only gather for 2 hours maximum. Singing is discouraged, but if you must sing, you must wear a mask and sing below a standard speaking voice. Here's that same old Governor Newsom the next couple of days ago. Let's have a look at this picture. He got in a little bit of trouble because he held a huge birthday party at this super exclusive French Laundry restaurant, one of the most expensive restaurants in the San Francisco Bay Area, and that is saying something. 12 different families that were not part of his household all got together, had a huge birthday party, and then, of course, he was caught, and he said, well, I probably shouldn't have done it. But isn't that a great example?
Yes, and this is an example of the thief. They go in and steal, but the only problem is if you get caught.
Yeah.
That's when they feel remorseful. Maybe I'll get a shorter sentence, you know, caught for. But that's it. They're getting caught. You were caught, and that's exactly what has happened here. And but you wonder about their IQs also, because you know, it seems like as bad as things are and as complacent as people are, but I think they believe, and to a large degree, there's a bunch of people, they have them in their palm of their hand. Yeah. Anything we say, the people will go along with it. Cancel Christmas, cancel Thanksgiving. But every once in a while we see people turning out anyway, and that's what we have to encourage. People, and then they come down hard on us for, like they do on Atlas. But why should they be able to get away with destroying the messenger of liberty? Yeah. You know, if we're promoting nonviolence and peaceful disobedience, if there has to be, and talking about freedom and peace, and then they turn around and they say they describe this in the most vicious of terms and turn it into a hate contest. Yeah. But that is why they should be called to task. This is why they got called, and I guess Pelosi and Newsom had to back off a little bit. A big deal until they think they're not going to get caught again. Next week they'll be doing something else.
Well, yeah, there is a good one on Pelosi. Remember Pelosi? She had her own little trip to the hairdresser when nobody else was allowed to go. It all turns out that the gyms in San Francisco were shut down, and she supported that shutdown. But the government buildings, they had their gyms, so the government workers got their gyms. Well, here it turns out, here's the next picture. She had to make a quick retreat because she was planning, this queen of lockdown, she was planning a lavish dinner on Capitol Hill for the Democrats who were victorious in the recent election. She had to, I'm bleeding tears for her because she had to turn it a grab and go rather than a sit-down dinner. But here's probably really the queen of all hypocrites. Let's look at this next one. The mayor of Chicago, probably the worst politician, the worst leader, the worst manager in the history of politics. Here she is when Biden apparently won her state and apparently won the election with a little help from the Friends. This is a great day for our city and our country. We are taking our democracy back. She's in a huge crowd of people celebrating the Biden-Harris victory. And here she is a couple of days later. Let's have a look at this. She gets back from her big celebration and says she's issuing a stay-at-home advisory. Stay home unless for essential reasons. Stop having guests over, including family members. Cancel traditional Thanksgiving plans. Lori Lightfoot out in the streets having a good time, but when it comes to the rest of us having Thanksgiving and having a good time, no way.
You can't help but wonder, where are these people that actually go out and vote? But I guess you'd have to be a believer that you're getting something. I think everybody votes on if they're going to vote, they vote for something that's going to benefit them. Whether it's the person looking for the handout or the military-industrial complex contract, or whether we're going to get a piece of liberty back again, you know, something like that. So everybody votes in their own interest. But you'd wonder how they could look at that administration in Chicago and think that there's something worthwhile. But you know, the big thing is Trump was on to it when he said, when you burn down your cities, you don't come to the federal government and get money and we rebuild them. But you know, I don't believe that'll ever go through. I mean, there'll be so much resistance. But that's what should be done. You know, they should have to pay for everything. And you say, well, there's a lot of innocent people going to suffer. Well, clean up your act.
Yeah.
But this whole thing will take care of itself, because eventually, you know, the purchasing power, what the government sends them, will dissipate, and they won't be able to send somebody else's wealth to them, because people are going to resist it. And that's why this is all the big picture. The big picture is the steady erosion and destruction of the financial monetary system. And yet today, you know, because the one new vaccine is, but the stock market's again up hundreds, thousands of points in these last few years, like it's going to go forever. You know, the things that can't go on forever don't. You know, and I think there's so many things that are happening that way. Like, how long can the deficit go? You know, not forever.
Yeah. Well, you segued into it again. This next clip, which is the shock announcement this morning. Amazing how just after the election you hear these announcements about vaccines coming in. Trump celebrates Moderna's 95% effective COVID-19 vaccine. Reminds the world it happened on my watch. Well, two things about that. Not sure how thrilled his supporters are with this jab. There's a lot of skepticism, and I think a lot of them are from Trump's people. But the other one is, Dr. Paul, you wanted to talk about this rash of vaccines, you know, and what it means.
Yeah, there's nobody knows the exact number, but there's over 100 new vaccines. Everybody's racing. Last week, the stock market and everybody was euphoric because Pfizer came out, and then you know, once again, are they stupid? Or is this? Are they good planners on how to give a boost, knock them down, give another boost? Yeah. So last week, Pfizer was rolling high. Their stock goes skyrocketing high, and they find out that it's not all that good. There's a lot of side effects to it, and therefore they found also that you had to have deep freeze, 70 degrees below zero, to pass it around. But amazing about modern technology. Just in a week, I think Moderna has a virus. Oh, guess what? You can keep our vaccine in a regular refrigerator, and so the problem is solved. So even though people were reassessing last week, they're ecstatic again, but they'll run out of steam. But it is, this whole thing is, especially if you get to the point, and I want to read a quote a little bit from Bill Sardi, that we might be dealing with something that is mystical. You know, it's hard to say nothing is there, but so far, this absolute scientific proof of what they find when they either find a bacterium or a virus and say, this is it, this is what you see, and this is how it works, and this is what we have to do. So far, they're not even close, but they do know that there's a good investment in working on viruses because it's taxpayers' money. They're all going to get
free money,
get stuff. But so that wouldn't be liberal Democrats who are totally in charge of. That's just the system. Republicans and Democrats alike. How many people? I can only remember one in the House who stood up against, you know, spending the money in the middle of the night and raising the dead, and that was Thomas.
Yeah.
You know, but everybody just goes along. Oh, you can't say boo. We need this, and yet they're not even sure of what they're dealing with.
We know, Dr. Paul, I was not a math major, as you know, but I'm just trying to figure out why we're celebrating a vaccine that's 95% effective against a virus from which 99% of the people survive.
Yeah.
Why is that so exciting? But wait, there's more, as they say on TV. Let's look at the next clip. Even with this wonderful vaccine, Fauci says that you still have to do social distancing and you still have to wear your masks even after you get this amazingly wonderful 95% vaccine against a 99% survival rate.
I want to sort of get to the end by talking about Bill Sardi, who writes on Lucite. He's not an MD, but boy, he is smart about the virus. He's really a journalist.
Yeah.
One that really does the investigation. He's come to a lot of conclusions that we agree with. But the headline on his article today, I think it caught my attention. It says that this is not the first time a vitamin deficiency was confused for a viral epidemic. So this should be very important to anybody, scientists. Yeah. Everybody, I think that even WHO and CDC knows it's difficult to isolate and see this virus and say, this is it, and we know everything we need to know about it. They're always putting them to put pieces together and running tests that aren't technically and scientifically proven to be the case. So anyway, this was, he pointed out a good example of, he was dealing with beriberi, and they said it was always an infection. It turned out to be a B1 deficiency. But the quote I want to mention here is having to do with this testing stuff, and he's quoting Peter Doshi, who's an investigator who alerts us to the fact that, I hope there's not too many numbers in here, that only 16% of flu cases are found to be influenza positive. That's not very many. How many shots do we give? Yeah. 1 million or 2? Unbelievable. And as I was reading this, I said, well, I'm looking for where he did it. He pulled this out of the air. He goes on to write, most flu appears to have nothing to do with influenza. British Medical Journal, volume 346, and he identifies exactly where he got his scientific information. So, 84% of subjects inoculated with the flu vaccine, this is influenza, are only being exposed to vaccine side effects and cannot be categorically benefit from vaccination. Wow. Because there's not that many people who actually have it. This fraud was reported 7 years ago. Wow. It's been there, it's been in the literature, and nobody pays any attention to it. He says, a terrible fate could await human populations who will be forced to immunize. Now he's sort of putting into the context of the virus, the COVID virus vaccine. And he's talking about numbers. He says if just 1/10 of 1%, that's not very many.
Yeah.
That's close to about the number who died from coronavirus. If 1/10 of 1% of the world's 7.9 billion people experiences serious side effects that result in hospitalization from the vaccine. Then 7.9 million people will fill hospital beds globally. The pro-vaccine news media serving as propaganda agents that will likely attribute these vaccine-induced illness, guess what, to the coronavirus.
Round and round.
And I mentioned many times the experience I had in '76 when I voted against, a rush swine flu vaccine, and the end of the story was nobody died from the flu, but many people died and had serious illnesses from the vaccine.
And at least if the vaccine does become available, why not make it available voluntarily to maybe people who are more vulnerable should have first dibs on it? If you're elderly, if you have comorbidities, hey, do you want it? Here you go, you can have it. And not forcing it on it. Why do they have to force it on? If it forced a free lunch on you, if it's so great, you're not going to have to force it on anyone. But I'm going to close, Dr. Paul, if you're ready. And mine's going to be a short closing. I want to thank our Super Chat people. These are the people who make donations, some small and some larger, as we're doing the show. And these things help us keep going. And I want to just say something very specific about it. Because about a week ago, we got new wireless microphones. We've been struggling with these wired microphones. You may have heard some scratching during the show. My microphone was shot. It was in terrible shape. And thanks to you who participate, we were able to get some decent wireless microphones. I hope the sound is better for you. But these are the real outcomes when you support the show and help us to keep going. So thank you. We're going to thank you. We have 2 weeks because we had a glitch last week. It turned all our votes to Biden. No, that was a different glitch. But we had a glitch last week and weren't able to thank you. So we have a rolling graphics to thank you this week. for participating and helping us keep going.
Very good. And I'm going to close with bringing up the subject once again about the hypocrisy. If there's anything that is so annoying, and most people resent hypocrisy, and that's what's going on. And we went into detail about this because they preach one thing and they do something something otherwise, and they do this with a straight face. And it's not just an intellectual problem; it's a evil problem. They're doing this to deceive the people. And what is their ulterior motive? And I think that's the biggest thing. And that can be sorted out. And I think people should be given, the benefit of the doubt on what their motivations are. But sometimes you just can't. You can't refuse to look at what they're doing, especially when the science is out on the platter. When even when we use evidence that they should question this, guess where we get a lot of it? CDC and WHO, WHO. They put information on. I guess there's some people in there that, they don't know enough about politics to be in the big show. What they do is they do their work and they do some investigation and they have results. And so we get information that shows that, they don't believe in all that they do. They come back, guys like Fauci just makes it up as they go along. This whole idea that he was on both sides of every issue. This spring when he was predicting millions of people, dying from all this, and they're back at it again. What are the odds of him knowing that it's going to be crucial for civilization of the whole world that we can't have Christmas next year? That's insane. And yet the people go along, well, he's making us safe and making us secure. That's the problem. Governments can't make us safe and they can't make us secure. Governments can protect our liberties so we can make ourselves safe and secure and take care of ourselves. That is the real issue. But dependency is easy to come by because people like the idea that they're safe and secure. Well, I think it's a good idea because when you provide it for yourself, believe me, you're going to feel safer and more secure than you will be if you depend on the likes of the politicians in Washington. And just look at the crew that we have up there now. And so much of what we suffer from, it's bipartisan. It emphasizes the fact that they are embedded with this idea that democracy, pure democracy, as long as the majority says it, it's okay. Well, where did that come from? When was it determined that the majority can take away the liberty of other people, the minorities who can't stand up to the majority? I'll tell you, there's one group of people that knew and understood this, and it's too bad that not too many people look at this group of people anymore, and those were the founders. They detested the radical democratic approach that the majority rules, and the dictatorship of the majority is a real thing, and we're suffering from that. The real problem is who's controlling the efforts of the so-called dictatorship of the majority. And that's the big problem. It just happens that the people who have the loudest microphone now are in the media and our universities. So that's where we have to be very careful and look at it. But we also have to be very clear on what we understand, what liberty is all about and where it comes from. And it's a personal responsibility that has to happen if we want to live in a peaceful world. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.